You've just accessed Hardware is Forever, your source for the expert insights, ideas, and innovations you need to do more in the electronics manufacturing industry. From optimization to operations, join us as we put the pieces together for a better approach to manufacturing. Let's go.
I'm Chris Bentliff. This is Hardware is Forever. I don't think I've ever reversed those around before, so that's new and fresh and original. Jay Patel is the CEO at Amtech, and we are having an interesting conversation around lean processes and what does lean mean to Jay as a CEO, to business leadership, really to sort of the concept of business efficiency and maximization and customer experience. All these things are connected. And Jay, we've been talking about kind of the customer value stream. We've been talking about the importance of understanding the customer value. The third principle that we're kind of digging into is create flow. And as always, what do you mean? What does that mean to you when you see that creating flow? It feels very Deming in a way, this idea of creating an optimized pathway, but maybe that's not what you think of. What do you mean by create flow? What do you think is meant by creative flow?
So I just want to disclaimer out there. And if there is a person who is a lean expert, they're probably losing their mind because they're thinking, Jay, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not a lean expert. You don't even know how to implement this. And to those people saying that, 100% you are correct. This is my journey. I'm going through it. I'm not an authority figure on it. But I may bring things that are abstract to it. But that's how my brain works, and that's how it's going to get me. That's what I'm going to have to do, and I'm going to have to say to be able to understand these things better. So, just a caveat out there that, yeah, if you think I don't know what I'm talking about, I agree with you. I don't know what I'm talking about. So,
all right, duly noted. Fair.
Yeah. So when it comes to creating flow, I think when we talked about lean, it's it's from the 1400s. That's when they first documented it. And I don't know if I wasn't there, in the Venice shipbuilding. I don't know what historians said. Were they actually talking about these 5 principles? I have no idea. But these are very common sense principles. And I think creating flow is just the most efficient path of getting what you need to get done. Rivers flow. And that's the best way for it to transport water because it's just going to go to flow and it's going to be impeded. And I think, right now, when we think about it as people, there's this new state of flow that people get into when they're really, really focused. And that, they say time slows down, and athletes will think about it. And then even when you're studying or designing something, or for me, it was coding. When I sat down and code, like hours could go by and I'll have an application that works. And then if people ask me, how did you get it to work? I have no idea because I was just in this state of flow at that time. So I think really what people want is when they're adding value, when they're doing anything, they want to be unimpeded so they can get into that state and create a process that is unimpeded. Like, these athletes, they're able to get in the state of flow, or coders are able to get in a state of coding, or engineers and designers are able to do that. Or even construction workers, they're able to get in the state of flow because they've set themselves up for success. They've removed all the obstacles from it. Like, even if I was working on the house and I'm on a ladder and working, but if I have to go up and down all the time because I have to grab a screw or a nail, I'm not going to get in that state of flow. Maybe eventually I will, but I have a lot of these things that really impede me to the job that I have at hand, both physically and possibly, and that affects psychology as well. So when we're creating the value, we want to make it so then it flows very, very easily. And it's almost like it happens very, very intuitively. Like, I don't know the last time I took training on how to use an Android phone or an iPhone or Gmail, but it flows very well. It's very, very intuitive. And I think that's where we want to talk about in lean manufacturing, lean processes, that whatever value that we're adding and whatever the value stream is, we want to make it so it's super, super intuitive. So if something is if I have to cut something that's 3 inches long consistently all the time. Rather than measuring it all the time and marking it and cutting it, I'm just going to create a jig. Even better than that, I'm going to create a machine that does it. And that allows the process to flow even more. So it's not as impeded as it was before. Like right now, if we look at logistics, they have, and it's not new. They've had it for a long time, but they have factories and they have warehouses that are lights out. We're completely automated. So everything gets picked, it brings it to you, it gets packaged, and it gets shipped. They've created that flow that adds that value to the customer. So I think that's where it really goes into looking at different processes. Is how can we make this thing flow in an unimpeded manner so it just happens very, very subtly and very intuitively, and the customer gets it without a lot of management, without a lot of friction, without a lot of frustration. So then the customers get what they need, and you get to solve the problem the customers hired you to solve.
I love this, and I love the analogy of the flow state, which I very much relate to. And for me, and as you just pointed out, the flow state is interrupted by friction. So if something, somebody knocks on my door, or I get some alert, or I get interrupted by something, that flow state, it turns out, is very fragile. So it's very highly productive, but it can be derailed quickly if my attention has to be moved to somewhere else. That's for me. I don't know how that is for everybody else. I think there's parallels there to what you're sharing. So if we have some point of friction, if we've created a flow state in our process of how we're building or creating or cultivating the customer experience or whatever, and there's some point of friction, it can derail the whole thing. So for me, what I'm hearing you say is it's a product of well-made systems, not the other way around. You don't create the flow state. The flow state doesn't create well-made systems. You have to have the well-made systems, don't interrupt me, for the flow state to sort of exist. Is that accurate? Does that resonate?
I mean, I think so. Like, I think it's very, very intentional. It just doesn't accidentally happen. Ford had to intentionally come up with the production line, and then he created it, and then he created a flow. So I think you have to be very, very intentional. There are these things, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, and I think that's where the visionaries come into play. Is they come up with these ideas, and then it is up to us to realize those type of ideas and make them reality. But really, it comes in, I don't know, epiphanies. It comes in whatever it is, intuition. But then you have to be very, very intentional to create the flow state and then maintain the flow. I said flow state, but create the flow and then maintain the flow. Just because you did it once doesn't mean it's going to stay forever. Like, what happens when the shift ends? You have to be able to document it. You have to be able to systematize it. You have to create an environment to be able to, physical and culture, to be able to come in the next day and then do your job again. So I think there's a lot to it, but it's really not that difficult.
One of the definitions I have in front of me for create flow is ensure a continuous flow of manufacturing and fulfillment so that products are produced at or near the same rate that they are required. Is that literally about reducing inventory? Like, is that kind of like the gold standard or the focus? And again, we can conceptually go wherever with that, but strictly in manufacturing, are we trying to kind of stay as one-to-one as we can? Is that a hallmark of efficiency if we are holding less inventory generally?
Yeah, I think it just adds up. I think the biggest resource that we cannot create more of or earn more of is time. So if we value the time and make sure that everything has been balanced, so then it's a 30-second tack time or 1 minute tack time or 5 minute tack time, and everybody's working for 5 minutes, after X amount of stations, we'll get the vehicle. After, I think it's 3 to 4 hours, we'll get a vehicle on the other end. So I think creating that flow is there. Number two, what's important is that people are not being rushed and people are not slowing down. I think, when we work in spurts, we get something done, and then when we have to waiting is the worst thing, because you want to get back into it. You want to do it again. And I think balancing that for people is important as well. And then also another thing about balancing is, because it's balanced, if something goes out of balance, it becomes very, very obvious, and things do go out of balance. And not because of people, but because of a host of reasons. And that when it's imbalanced, it becomes very, very easy to identify what number one, it is imbalanced. And number two, where is that imbalance coming from? So you can attack the problem and fix it.
Does this, what you just described, the imbalance or the problem, or what I said was friction or the interruption, does that connect back to what we talked about earlier with the value stream? One thing that's interesting for me, as you mentioned the river a minute ago, was we have a value stream and we are creating flow. Do you feel like those are on purpose analogies? Or if we're thinking about the value stream, should we be thinking about how it flows and removing points of friction? Yeah,
absolutely. Like, you want your stream to flow. So if you have any impediments, if you have like a fallen tree in your stream, like remove the fallen trees because it'll flow a lot better. Things are not going to get stuck. Things are not going to get bottlenecked anywhere. I think all those things, like I said, lean isn't hard to understand. It is hard to do. So I think what you said is right. I think these guys who wrote this and said, create a value stream, create a flow, they all, map the value stream, create a flow. They're very intentional on the words that they used.
How do we get our team on board with this? I'm thinking about a lot of what we discussed with Deming's 14 points, but this doesn't work if nobody needs to be a lean expert, but if people aren't sort of understanding the broader sort of point of view, and maybe that's just because their job description says do this, and whoever wrote the job description knows that's done in an effort to reduce inefficiency or reduce friction. But how do we make sure that everybody is understanding kind of where we're headed with this, or the importance of this, or why we want to do this?
Yeah, I think it just goes back to the leadership and organization, Yeah. So like you got to say, hey, we're adding value. And if it means we have to change, if we have to throw out the way that we were doing things and implement a new way, we cannot be risk averse because the focus is adding value to the customer. And if that remains, then all these things are easy. If the focus is don't make a mistake or get this done in 30 seconds, then people start getting scared.
When you are when you're thinking ahead, when you're thinking strategically about the next X amount of time, running the business or shaping the business, is lean at where you are right now as kind of a student of this? Is this part of your improving this is important to me at Amtech or me as a leader, or is this if we do things right, lean will become apparent, or like where is this? How does this exist for you beyond concepts as you are kind of running things in the leadership team at Amtech?
So I think the great companies have a team dedicated to operational excellence, which goes through, does value stream mapping, understands what the customer wants, does value stream mapping, has Kaizen events, improves it and then repeats it. And those companies who can pull it off have really put a great foundation in place to be able to do that. Number one, they are competitive. They have become lean to an extent that they're competitive enough to have an operational excellence team. Otherwise, other companies may charge equivalent for that, but not because they have so much waste, they're not able to get an OpEx team that can do these things. So that's number one thing. Number two things, I think companies need to really put and select the technology, systems, processes, infrastructure to be able to build on top of those things and be agile enough to change. And that takes a lot of intention. So, if I go outside and do a value stream map and create a flow and try to create a flow, but I find out that my facility does not help, is not conducive to that flow because that's just how it is. My facility's too small or it's too big or, whatever it is. I need to put that foundation in place. And I think that the really great companies, they understand and create really good strategic decisions to be able to implement these type of principles, not only today, but continuously. And that one day, if your facility or your infrastructure that you have does not allow you to do that, then you have to be bold enough and say, hey, we're going to change because we've hit our limit and how much we can improve this, which is great. I mean, you won. And then put something else in place to be able to take you to the next level.
As ever, it's iterative. Like there's not a finish line. There's just the next thing, the next version of the next part. Jay Patel is the CEO at Amtech, and we're talking about lean manufacturing, lean processes. I'm looking forward to the next chapters of this as we discuss it, and also I'm looking forward to when we get to the end of the series and we sort of check in with what have we learned or what have we done. We should do that with Deming too. We should sort of like, it's been a minute, so where is it now? Like how is it living with you? I'm interested in how that's all going with you.
Yeah, we can do that.
Thank you, Jay. We'll talk next time.
Thanks for joining us, and a special thanks to our subscribers and followers. Consider becoming one today wherever you get your podcasts or on YouTube. Hardware is Forever is designed, tested, engineered, and built by the manufacturing experts at Amtech. Learn more and let us help you envision your next project with a free Design for Manufacturing assessment at buildamtech.com/DFM.